Thank you. Thank you. It'll wake you guys up after you're reading the bio. Thank you guys all for coming this Saturday morning. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with you all. As you just heard from Keith, yes, I am a clinician, but I'm very much an advocate for being out in the community. Concussions are an important issue. They're an issue that gets a lot of attention. And so I hope today that through this discussion we can both kind of lend some knowledge and information that really allows you to feel empowered of how you're going to recognize this injury, manage it, and prevent more serious outcomes from occurring. Now, I have a lot of information today, but I am very happy to just stop at any point and discuss any questions that pop in your mind, so please don't hesitate to ask and interrupt. I do, in general, want to cover just concussion, understand what it really is. We all use this term, but I often find in my clinic very few parents and children can actually explain to me what it truly is, and I want to make sure you understand that, because if you understand what it is, everything else makes a lot more sense. I want to talk about the role that a league can play, and as well as Virginia state law, which is in the process of being amended right now, as well as current management strategies, kind of what the research is stating. Concussions aren't good. I think we can all agree on that. But the biggest epidemics in this country are actually obesity and mental illness. So sports are actually good at really combating those. So we want to definitely strike the balance between keeping our kids active and healthy and making sure that they're staying safe. And we can't prevent all concussions. But what we can do is we can prevent more serious injuries from occurring, meaning we're going to recognize it quickly, we're not going to let them return to play too soon, and we can take action steps to prevent prolonged recovery, meaning let's learn how to manage this injury. Let's be active components in that. And let's support that athlete as they recover, not just physically, but also emotionally, socially, and academically. All right, let's talk about what concussion is. We've probably all heard blow, bump, head, or body, right, causes that brain to really shake back and forth. And you don't have to just get hit in the head. You can actually get hit in the body, and it causes that head to really whip back and forth. When that happens, that movement really strains and impairs the brain function, and that causes signs and symptoms. So it's that impairment that gives you those things you can look for. But let me show you what it really is. All right. I'm glad this isn't lunchtime. Sometimes it grosses people out. All right, you see how this movement, I'm going to play this a couple times. When you get hit in the head or body hard enough to get a concussion, this is what's happening. Now, the brain doesn't flash, that's dramatic, but there is a lot of movement that can occur. And let me jump ahead here. I promise this has to do with concussion. See, I told you I work in Ohio State and every single tack I do. In addition, for a chance to show my allegiance to my sports team, this is how you can remember what a concussion really is, okay? So that movement I just showed you, right? Okay, well, your brain is actually the consistency of about mayonnaise. Think about how jiggly that is. Kind of gross, right? Sorry. But if that amount of movement, when that happens, that amount of stretching occurs, it actually starts a chemical change. You can almost think like a snow globe. I tell the kids, think like someone just shook a snow globe, like neurochemicals just got shaken up. Well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that when those neurochemicals change, when you shook that snow globe, it actually wipes out the body's energy system. Okay? Well, if you only have half a battery, I tell kids, think like your cell phone at best is half a battery, and you use it all day for Facebook and Twitter, sorry Taylor, for all the things you're looking up. And if you keep using it and don't stop and rest even for a moment and recharge, well, when that battery and that energy system gets too low because of the concussion, you get symptoms. So symptoms, headaches, nausea, dizziness, are really only, at least at first, your body's way of expressing where your energy level is, which is why you'll see kids rest and start to feel better, so they go do things, and then they start to feel worse. Well, they drain through their energy too quickly. And so the management overall is kind of that not too little, not too much approach I'm going to get to in a minute. So most of you are familiar with signs and symptoms. I just want to buzz through them, but we're going to give you some tools to remember, which is probably the most important thing here in a second. So danger signs. One of the questions I get is, what am I really looking for, and where do I go after I observe signs and symptoms? So the first thing you're looking for if you think a child sustained a concussion are danger signs. And here are a few of them. Specifically loss of consciousness, although that's really not that common. Uneven pupils, the headache that's getting worse and worse, they keep vomiting. If you have any of these, call 911 and your job is done, because this is a sign that something more serious than a concussion is occurring. It means the brain may be swelling or bleeding. But these are honestly pretty uncommon, and so what you're more likely to see are maybe some more mild signs, and these are meant to be more mild, maybe little personality changes that just a little different, or they're answering things a little more slowly, they look a little dazed. Those are things you need to keep an eye on. They represent a concussion has occurred, but they don't necessarily mean you have to go to the emergency department. You can notify your pediatrician. So signs are things you're going to observe, and symptoms are things the athlete's going to report to you. You can think of symptoms in terms of cognitive, they're not thinking clearly, they seem a little mentally foggy. Physical headache is common, but you don't have to have a headache to have a concussion, okay? No, there's no one magic symptom, so you actually need to know all of these. They may be more fatigued, lights or noises are bothering them, they feel dizzy, they feel nauseous, they're cranky, they're sad. Now you're thinking, I have a teenager, they're cranky, right? They're fatigued, right? But you also know your kid. And you know when your kid is acting differently than their normal self. Sleep, if you are the parent, you want to look, are they having trouble falling asleep? Or are they sleeping more than usual? So we have a really easy algorithm to remember how to diagnose concussion. Not diagnose, but how to suspect a concussion. 1 + 2. 1, a blow or force to the head or body. That's the first thing you're looking for. And 2, any change in function, behavior, performance. Those are signs and symptoms. And your job as coaches, as parents, as league officials, is if you see that 1 + 2, you need both, your job is to say that I suspect there may be a concussion and I'm going to do the right thing and get that athlete off the field. If you see a blow or hit and there's no change in functioning, no symptoms, probably not a concussion. If you've got some symptoms but there's absolutely no hit, it's also probably not a concussion. So you really need to look for those two things. All right, everybody have those memorized? Could you recite every single one of them? Because there may be a pop quiz in a few months when your athlete gets knocked around and is a little slow to get up. Okay? So how are you actually going to remember this, right? I'm thrilled you all are here spending their Saturday, but we need to talk about how you're actually going to remember this. Yes, sir?
So if you just have the one,
Mm-hmm.
right? You see your athlete get hit, knocked down, but those,
A big hit, sure.
Yeah, a big hit, or just did fall down, just didn't look right. Would you suggest even just subbing them out at that point to see
Absolutely.
what's happening?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you're not going to know if they're experiencing signs and symptoms unless you talk to your athlete. So I do not mean to imply, they're not coming off the field voluntarily in the middle of the game saying, hey, I don't feel well. That's not going to happen. I'm stating if you see a hit and you're now talking to the athlete and they truly look fine to you, they're answering questions in a way that is commensurate with how they normally do, they're denying their symptoms. Now, that's subjective, and I understand that athletes want to return to play. But if there really isn't any change in function that we can detect, we can't hold every single kid out for every single hit. But with that said, if you see a really big hit, symptoms can present later on too. So, it's a gray zone. This is not a black and white issue. There's not a hard and fast rule we can give you. Say, yes, ma'am.
Well, now the symptoms are quick.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You sub them out, the symptoms are quick.
They can be, and more commonly they are. More commonly, they're going to have immediate symptoms. They may not be every symptom that child's going to experience, but maybe a little bit of a headache already. I feel a little dizzy right now. I'm a little nauseous. I got tired all of a sudden. But that's also not a for sure thing. There are kids who genuinely feel fine, but then they go home that night and start some homework, or they go to school the next day, and that's when symptoms really start to appear. There are also kids who just get headaches, and so, what's a concussion headache? So you have to use your judgment. I'll say you need to err on the side of caution. While I'm a big sports fan, again, I started my talk that way. Sports are good for kids. This is their brain. This is the rest of their life. It's health. And the most dangerous thing we can do is return a kid to play too soon, because that's when the long-lasting effects really can occur. Yeah, good question. Thank you. So we all agree, right? We're not going to remember all this, especially in 6 months when you're in the middle of a game and you got all the athletes in front of you. So let me give you a couple tools. How many people in here have a smartphone? Yes. Okay. So this is one of the apps, in full disclosure, we helped to develop it, but we did so because of this reason. We're standing in front of parents and we're finding that, we need to give you something that's going to walk you through the process. So Concussion Recognition Response, it's a free app. You can download it if you have an iPhone or a Droid. There are other apps out there as well, but here's the point. The point is that you want something that's going to guide you in the moment and that you're going to put in your pocket right now, so that when you are tested, whenever that may be, you're ready and prepared to ask and assess every single danger sign, and symptom, so you know you're doing the best you can for that athlete. This particular app is not just a sideline tool. But it also, for parents, it monitors symptoms at home. It gives you basic FAQ information, some homeschool basic instructions, and then when the athlete is recovered and deemed by the clinician to be ready to start to go back to play, it gives you some guidance on that too. This is a sample of whether using our app or the other materials I'm about to show you. This is the type of information and interview things you should be going through. You know, did they vomit? I'm going to record that. Is there balance problems? And you just click through. And for this app, it gives you a summary at the end. And what I like about this is there's a summary, there's an algorithm that's built in. It says, you know what, yeah, what you just told us means that concussions probably occurred. So concussion suspected. So here are the things you need to do, and boom, it lists them out. But what's also nice, if you see up here, there's this little email function. So if you as a coach have just done this, or maybe you have a safety person on your team, boom, you email it to the parent, and the parent now has a record of what just occurred. So when they come to a medical provider, I as a medical provider, not asking that dazed and stunned kid what happened 2 weeks ago when the parent wasn't there. I now know what signs and symptoms evolved, what type of hit occurred, and I have real data that helps me guide their treatment and management. It also contributes anonymously to research, and as you know, we need a lot more research, especially on kids in this area. Some other wonderful tools that are out there, and there are more developing. That's all fantastic. I'm going to let Taylor tell you a little about some of the ones that he's got as well. But this is from the CDC. This is all free to you to download. So if you don't have a smartphone, or for whatever reason that's not your preference, go to the CDC website, and there are cards, there's clipboard stickers, there are clipboards, all with the things that I just mentioned that'll help guide you when you are tested. Yes, sir?
On the app that you developed, multiple players you could put into that?
Absolutely, yes.
Is there a quantity number that you could have?
Not that I've heard anybody reach yet, so hopefully you're not the one. Yeah, sure.
It's an excellent.
Oh, good. Yes, wonderful, thank you. We've gotten some good feedback in terms of coaches and parents who've had to unfortunately use it in their time of need. We've actually heard that it speeds up time in emergency department too, because if you walk in with all the information, the doctor doesn't have to ask you all those questions. So they take a look, they read it real fast, and your kid is off to the next level of care, which is nice. So let's talk about what we can do to really prevent this injury. You know, it's kind of an oxymoron because we're never going to prevent every single concussion from happening. Only 60% occur in sports. So there's lots of reasons concussions can occur, but we can do some things to lessen the chance and certainly lessen the impact. So here in Virginia, like all other states in the District of Columbia, we do have a concussion law. Now ours is changing right now, but this is the most up-to-date. I copy and pasted. Virginia, as coaches, you need to know this, is saying that any non-interscholastic youth sports, if you're using public school property, this applies to you. You have to establish policies and procedures regarding the identification and handling of concussions. You've got to talk to your athletes and the parents on an annual basis about information on concussions. If an athlete is suspected, not diagnosed, but suspected of having a concussion, you must remove them from play. And that athlete cannot return to play the same day, nor can they until they have received written medical clearance by a licensed healthcare provider. Okay. Any questions on that? Because I think that's really important. Yes, ma'am. This is current. This actually went into effect, I think it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah, for Virginia. I was trying to think what Virginia was. Virginia was on the earlier side, but it has been amended a couple times more in terms of what the school is doing. I just saw the new bill that's on the Senate floor right now, and they're working on getting schools to enforce a management of academic care when an injured student returns to play, which is great. Or, I'm sorry, returns to school.
Doc, can you leave this up here real quick?
Sure.
I just want everyone to, I wrote this down as a point to be made. Until written medical clearance is provided by a licensed healthcare provider.
Hopefully knowledgeable
Okay,
about
so,
concussion.
For instance, we had about 20 parents in the month of November for youth soccer go to their dentist to get a written clearance because their kid wanted to play in the state high school final. So, listen, I've cheated rules all the time, although I will say this, that my balls are inflated even though I'm from Boston. The point of the matter is this, is that we as adults know what a licensed healthcare provider. If you've got a broken foot, you don't go see an eye doctor. So as much as we can get around this law, which is why the law is being amended, and which is why I'm speaking on it, is the fact that a licensed healthcare provider, we know better as coaches, parents, dentists shouldn't be giving us clearance. A chiropractor shouldn't be giving you clearance, whatnot.
Agreed, and that's a good point. And to be fair, most pediatricians have absolutely the best interest for your child in their minds, but not every pediatrician is actually trained to manage this injury. So if what you're hearing today, as a coach or as a parent, doesn't quite match what you think the doctor's providing, get a second opinion. There are a lot of pediatricians out there and general docs who need a little bit more education in terms of proper return to play and really fully diagnosing and understanding the injury. But we want to go beyond the minimum standard, right? That law is the minimum standard, but we need to do better. And so I'm just going to breeze through these. I'm happy to provide these to anyone who wishes. But 10 things you need to be able to answer as a league, as a coach, as a parent, to make sure you're not just doing the bare minimum. So number 1, do you have a concussion policy? I hope so. It's state law. Can you identify that trained healthcare provider? So if your child or your athlete goes down and has an injury and the parent says, I don't know where to go, who in your community is really knowledgeable about this so they don't end up at the dentist getting their clearance? Who's doing your concussion education training? Is it required or recommended? What's the protocol on the sideline? What tools do your coaches have in their pocket? Because just like you all, they're not going to remember every single thing we just said today if an injury occurs. So what's the protocol for informing parents if a concussion is suspected? Does that policy specify when an athlete can return to play? What's your league doing in terms of teaching proper techniques, limitations on contact? And is your league open to feedback from parents about safety? So I know I went through those quick, but if you can answer all of these, we really do feel like this is part of the gold standard to keeping our kids as safe as possible. Baseline testing, this definitely is probably a word that most of you are, a phrase most of you are familiar with. It can be a combination of things. It can be balance testing. It should be a combination of things. Balance testing, identifying pre-injury symptoms. Lots of kids have migraines. Just because they have a headache after they hit their head and they've always had migraines doesn't actually mean they have a concussion always. Visual tracking is a huge one. More commonly, it's a computerized neurocognitive evaluation. That's what's most popular. But what that test, especially the computerized neurocognitive measures, what it is actually is it's a measure of cognitive skill, which is also the process of how they're performing that skill, the testing conditions, whether they're tired that day, whether they have a headache, whether their cell phone is going off, their friends next to them talking. All of those factors go into how they just performed on that measure. So therefore, it's not just scores. Okay. Baselines are very useful if they're done properly. They're typically given preseason. They're best used to help guide management and treatment of a concussion that's already diagnosed. They also help when aiding return to play decisions. They need to be conducted by trained personnel. They do not diagnose a concussion. Okay, if you think your kid has sustained a concussion, running to go get the baseline test, which is now post-injury, does not diagnose concussion. And just because they get low scores also doesn't mean they have a concussion. So you don't need to go run and repeat the test immediately. You want to use that tool as one tool in your toolbox of guiding the management and when it's proper to go back to contact.
And famously, if we remember last year's Super Bowl, Peyton Manning said that everyone in the NFL are now cheating on the baseline by trying to flunk it. The reality is that that's the most idiotic thing to say because there's no right or wrong answer on that. I will say this, because I was going to bring it up. I've passed it 70 plus times within 6 months after my concussion. So the number one thing we get at my foundation is that baseline testing, you pass the test, he's cleared to play. It is not a diagnostic tool. I passed it 70 plus times. I think it was 72. Concussion, obviously my memory's already gone. But the point of the matter is that too often we think the baseline test is a diagnostic tool. It is not. It is a way to assess the situation.
One part of the situation, yeah. Absolutely. So kind of getting towards the end here, management, while I understand you're here mainly as coaches and representing your sports league.
And to see me.
And of course, to see Taylor.
Get it together, Doc.
I do think you need to be knowledgeable about some of the things that occur after your athlete has sustained a concussion, and then I'll wrap up with research and let Taylor take over here. All right, so rest. Usually when you think of concussion, you think of the treatment as being rest. Well, actually, that's a little bit old school. We're learning a lot more these days. Rest is a continuum from no activity, full rest, clear, to full activity, no rest. But in reality, there is no such thing as full cognitive rest unless you're sleeping or comatose, but even then your brain waves are working. So too much rest, this is what's newer. Too much rest contributes actually to the maintenance of symptoms, probably what we're beginning to understand after 3 days. So if you tell a kid to go and rest until they're symptom-free, what we're finding is that they take a lot longer to recover, because now you're taking an athlete or putting them in so-called black box, telling them to do nothing. So you're isolating them, you're frustrating them, and guess what all that stress is doing? That stress is eating up energy. Well, what does this injury need to get better? Energy. So you get in this pattern of let me stress the kid out, drain their energy, make their symptoms worse, which makes them stress out more, which drains more energy, and we get in this cyclical pattern. So really, you do want to rest initially, maybe 1 to 3 days. This is approximate, maybe a little longer for more severe injuries, but after that, let's start getting them active. So the whole therapeutic goal is not too little, not too much. How much activity, cognitive and physical, can I do before my body gives me signs or symptoms that that's too much? It's about finding that sweet spot. I'm not saying go back to contact sports. I'm talking about walking, stationary biking, light weightlifting. Maybe go shoot a hoop in my yard, or on my court with my dad, something like that.
But to go back on what Doc's saying, and too often I think we miss this a little bit, is you don't go to school from 8 to 5
Sure.
and then come home and do light exercise, because that 8 to 5 is the hardest thing to do. And technically that's exercise for someone,
Oh, absolutely.
for all of us, but when you're symptomatic. And a lot of times, parents, again, over the last 5 years with my foundation, will say, my kid's not playing, but he's at school from 8 to 6 every day.
Sure.
And then he comes home and he plays video games for an hour.
And then we're texting as we're trying to go to bed, which is until 2 in the morning. We get up to 6 and do it all over. Absolutely. So this actually brings me to my next point is, it takes a whole team. We're here talking to soccer teams, but it takes a whole management team to get these kids better from this injury. Medical is one side. As a clinician, it's my responsibility to constantly be tweaking that care plan. How much can they do before they get symptoms? Okay, well, we're going to find that sweet spot both academically, socially, emotionally. The family needs to not only uphold that treatment plan and monitor to give me feedback, but also identify what the youth can do and help us send that consistent message. Most kids get better. Okay, almost all kids get better. And so we really need to keep it positive, because if I sit here and tell you you're not going to get better, that's only going to cause stress and prolong recovery. School, as Taylor was just mentioning, this is really gaining some nice ground, but academically, you need to start off partial days at best, probably with a rest break, no testing, reduced homework, these types of things, gradually working into full days still with rest breaks, then starting to pull supports away little by little. And you're right, often I hear, well, we didn't go back to soccer, but I went back to exam week, and I failed my exams, and I feel worse, and what's going on? And athletics, of course, your role that you can play is you may be able to take part in providing some opportunities for kind of that low-level non-contact activity, while they're recovering. But most importantly, if you hear nothing else, please, please, please support your athlete emotionally and socially while they're recovering, because you are their social outlet, you are their self-esteem, and that is extremely important components of recovery. And finally, I always value coaches' opinions about monitoring as a child's getting back to life. So real fast, recovery means that they don't have any symptoms at rest or with some increased physical non-contact activity. They're not taking Tylenol to get rid of those symptoms just because they want to play, and that their neurocognitive evaluation or school performance is kind of back to normal. That then usually spurs into the gradual return to play, which is about a 5-step approximate, gradually increasing activity from very, very low level to increasing to more moderate and vigorous levels, eventually getting to maybe a non-contact practice and a full contact practice before you're ever cleared to go into a contact game. And lastly, what we need to know, we know for sure that there's definitely no magic number of concussions or a magic symptom. Some kids have 1 or 2 concussions, and unfortunately they need to retire from sports. Some kids can sustain many more and actually be just fine. Less than 10% of youth are going to lose consciousness, so if that's the only thing you're looking for, we're missing 90%. Most youth, the latest stat I just heard was about 80 to 90% of youth are fully recovering from this injury. And when you see those who are not and they have the prolonged recovery, it's typically due to a variety of both concussion and non-concussion factors. But we have a lot to learn about this injury, and specifically what products are going to help prevent or lessen the injury. Right now, there is no helmet, mouth guard, or headgear that is going to prevent a concussion. Please hear me say that. We don't have any research that even the technology, the headgear that's out there right now is reducing the forces. We need more research, but right now, if you put the headgear on your child, do not think they're protected from a concussion, because they're not. We need to understand the difference between boys, girls, adolescents, younger kids, adults. Why do some kids take longer than others? Genetics is probably playing a huge role. And what I commonly get from my soccer families is, what is the effects of repeated hits to the head or those subconcussive blows, headers? What's the relationship of heading too young versus adolescence versus not starting until they're 18? Taylor and I were just discussing that. We don't actually have research yet that tells us at what age is appropriate, and that research really needs to be done. What we do know is that the kids who've had the most severe consequences from concussions or fatalities are actually adolescent males. So what I'm pretty confident in saying is that starting to learn a new skill at the most vulnerable time of your brain's development, as we think, is probably not a good idea. But I don't want to claim that I have the answer either. So this is very much an area we need research in, but we need to think carefully about picking an arbitrary number and making that a hard, fast rule. So in summary, I hope you can remember that, if you think you've suspected a concussion, it's that 1+2 algorithm: blow or hit to head or body, and a change in functioning. And again, as state law now requires, I need you to remove them from play if you suspect an injury. We really want to prevent more serious harm from occurring. Use your tools. Hopefully they're already in your pocket. If not, I hope you download them or print off something soon. It needs to be on you in your time of need. Finally, please support your athlete during recovery. You have more influence over them than you may even realize. And finally, do not allow them to return until that gradual return to play is completed and they've received written medical clearance, hopefully not from their dentist, but from a knowledgeable clinician. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
So when the parents ask us about the headgear and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, what's the best response? Because most
Sure.
have that idea that, hey, I'm good, I'm invincible. So,
Sure, absolutely. It's a very common question again, and it's a great one. So again, at this point, that headgear is not going to prevent a concussion. So if your parent is asking, I'm going to put this on my child, can I put this on my child's head to prevent concussion? The answer is, well, it doesn't. And we don't have research to show that it's actually helping at all. However, is it going to hurt your child? Is it going to possibly absorb those lower level forces? Maybe. I will tell you, and this is from this area, I'm a clinician in Fairfax, so I'm right in here with you. Kids are getting targeted if they're the only one in their team wearing it. So if you put the headgear on, the kid who's had the most concussions, and that's your star athlete, well, if somebody wants to be a little aggressive with that kid, where do you think they're going to target them? So I'm very sad to report, but I've had some kids in my clinic where if they are the only child on their team wearing that headgear, they're being targeted. And so my recommendation is, if you want to wear it, please have the whole team wear it. Don't think you're going to be preventing all concussions. Your coaches, your parents, your athletes still need to be educated on everything else we just discussed. But I don't think it's going to hurt you to wear it, but I ask that the whole team wear it.
It's very difficult to play doctor. So, and obviously I'm not a medical professional. I'll simplify it for you. If a parent comes to you and says, my kid would like to wear a headgear, you simply ask, how does he or she feel? Have they had concussions? Because a lot of soccer clubs now around the country are making it mandatory. So one, every kid on the team wears it. But two, you can't all of a sudden just institute a helmet after having 4 concussions thinking that's going to stop you. And too often, there's 2 athletes that played for DC United. They got concussions with the headgear on. But I have absolutely no problem with the headgear if the athlete, he or she, is asymptomatic. And that's simply out of your hands as a coach. But if parents ask you, is your kid fine? They say yes. Kid has no problem. He or she just feels better with it on. Then that takes care of their comfort level and they want to.
Sure. And I think how the
But
athlete
if we're
feels
going to
is
say
important.
preventing concussions, then guess what? The NFL has the best helmets in the world I've ever seen.
Right.
They've got a concussion problem.
Yeah.
My fear is that I do have a player that's had concussions. The parents have put the headgear on.
Sure.
And they have this false sense, I guess, after they hear that they're getting more than they want. So I don't
Sure, and I'm not against the headgear, as Taylor is
Yeah,
saying, but I'm fearful because I get a lot of kids in my clinic, parents saying, I don't know, over here he had the headgear on, and it's like, here's the analogy I use with the kids, and then I'll wrap up. I know my time is up, but if you shake an egg, the inside moves, right? If I bubble wrap that egg and shake it, the inside still moves. We saw my graphic earlier, right? Until we have something that prevents that force from shaking the inside of the brain, the inside of the egg, we're not going to prevent all the concussions. So a little layer of foam on the outside is not going to prevent those hits.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the cumulative effect of concussions? The literature I keep reading says that you never completely heal from a concussion, and that the cumulative damage over the years is a big problem, especially for somebody who's a professional athlete.
Sure. So the literature you're referring to is actually based on adults. Those studies have not yet been conducted in kids, and we really have a lot of evidence to agree that the developing brain is quite different than the adult brain. Are repeated hits to the head really good? Probably not. I don't need research to tell me that. But how many hits, at what level, at what age, at what there's a lot of factors. I think that we're smart to try to look for opportunities to reduce risk. It doesn't make sense. Taylor was mentioning this earlier, so I'm going to steal your thunder, to be heading a ball going 40 miles an hour. That's probably not good for the inside of that egg, your brain, right? But lower level hits, we don't know. So the short of it is we don't know yet, and that research is absolutely needed. But the literature isn't there yet for youth or kids, so we don't know the long-term outcomes yet.
And one thing I wanted to say about the headgear, one theory that's floating around about helmets in the NFL and football in general is that it gives people a false sense of security, and therefore they go further and harder than they would have without it.
That's certainly true, and if you look at girls lacrosse, when they introduced the goggles, the intensity of the game kind of ramped up. I don't think anyone will disagree. With that said, helmets are good. They do a nice job preventing skull fractures, and I'll tell you what, that's scary. Skull fractures are scary. That can lead to long-term consequences as well. So we don't need to get rid of helmets, but we just need to educate that helmets don't prevent concussions and make efforts to making sure we're preventing the more serious concussions.
But you're also comparing helmets in the NFL for grown men as opposed to a 6, 7, 8-year-old boy or girl wearing a helmet. It's apples and oranges.
Absolutely. And you need to talk about neck strength, upper body strength, things like that in terms of preventative measures as well. Thank you.
Wow, so we go doctor to me.
Superstar.
Alrighty. First off, August 30th, 2008, it's safe to say that Nationwide wasn't providing Virginia youth soccer with an education like you're getting today. This is ultimately when my life changed forever. Something I had done a million times in my career. Ball, score a goal. I'd look for a DC United goal for you guys, but I just couldn't find one. So I'm going to just show you guys. As I was sitting here listening, and Doc and I had breakfast this morning. August 30th, 2008. So the irony is that we hear all the time about back in the day, this stuff happens. Well, George Blanda and all these guys back in the 60s, 70s, 80s in the NFL, soccer players can't get concussions. That was 2008. My life did change forever, but I will tell you this, it's been the greatest gift God has ever given me. Because I now have an opportunity to actually really make a difference. Nobody, and it's only been 7 years, nobody remembers me as a player, which is why I have to remind everyone with a highlight film. But it's more so because I'm not a parent yet, but I'm sitting in here. I feel for every single one of you in this room. Because with my foundation, ThinkTaylor.org, we started a acronym, CARE, Concussion Awareness, Recognition, Education. Concussion awareness is at the highest it's ever going to be. And yet all of you are in this room for one reason. Trying to figure it out. Just like doctors in this country are trying to figure it out. My goal on a personal level is to change two things. The recognition and rehabilitation. That entire slideshow, well done, educated, how much of it was on rehabilitation? And I talked to my dad about this, who played 10 years in the NASL, and he said the ACL in the 70s and 80s, for those of you that are old enough to remember, was the career-ending injury. You can never recover from it. I can guarantee you this, 10 years from now, what'd you say, Doc? Most 80-90% recover. It will be 100%. They may not get their career back, which I can give a crap about. They're going to get their life back. The one injury that can take away your life and change it for good is traumatic brain injury. I don't use the word concussions as much anymore because there's something interesting. So I took notes, and Doc and I had breakfast, and I'm not a medical professional, but I disagree with a couple of things, and I speak in layman terms. Blow to the head. It's not always the case. And I love the video that Doc showed. It's the egg. It's in the brain. Whiplash is a huge component of concussions. You do not need to hit your head to get a concussion. And and for us in this room, soccer players, coaches, parents, imagine going up for a header. Someone comes in from behind you. You don't hit your head. Your brain can rattle as quickly as it can. If it's a young girl, because genetically there's differences there, that's one thing to remember. It's real easy for me to educate you guys with this saying. When in doubt, sit them out. That player right there, Shalry Joseph, Steve Ralston, Jay Heaps, that entire team that was on that field, I get a text from one of them every 12 months, swear to God, saying we wish we would have told you at that moment to get off the field. Now, I did the sideline protocols, and keep in mind, I've told this story 1,000 times. I don't blame anyone at the New England Revolution. I don't blame any medical professional. Because all of those medical professionals that were on the field that day know exactly what happened. But this, follow the finger, walk in the straight line, I'm telling you guys, it's January 31st, 2015. It's not good enough. Now, my sympathy goes to you guys because you don't have that access. This is simply what I want to tell you today. And Doc gave you 10 things. There's one thing you need to know. And this is why I really appreciate Nationwide Insurance putting this on. Education. How come we're more educated on everything else except this injury? The more people that come to us at the foundation are parents that got in car crashes, horseback riding, fell off their desk chair. Anyone in this room can get a concussion. Yet it's the least educated injury any of us have. So if I'm a parent and I'm sending my son or daughter to practice every day, I better pray to God that that coach that day is educated on traumatic brain injuries, that knows the questions to ask, that doesn't put pressure. I'm so thankful Doc put up that app. Do you know what I picture people with the app? Let's do this. There's 15 questions. Oh, you don't feel dizzy, do you? No. You don't have a headache? No. Oh, you're a leading goal scorer. You're fine. No, that app is for the kid. That app is for the athlete. If we are educated on the injury, this isn't to scare you, but it is in a weird way because I don't think all of us are taking the injury seriously enough. This is 2015. I've run the foundation for 6 years. We are still getting parents 2 Tylenol orange juice, get back on the field. It's the high school state championship. Guys, high school state championship. You follow where I'm going here? The one injury that takes away your life, and it's taken me 6 years to get to the point now that my rehabilitation's turning the corner. We don't need to have kids doing this. We do not need kids doing this. I know your question's going to be heading the ball. I answer all your questions on Twitter all the time. I answer all your questions sent to us on Facebook. Let me ask you this. If I coach a team anywhere from the ages 6 to 14, why in God's name are we punting the ball 30, 40, 50 times in the air, challenging it at this age? For 1 year, I followed under 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, and 11s. Just random. Went to trainings. If the training was an hour, 20 minutes was spent on heading. Now, luckily, my job has given me some great access. Spain, England, Italy, France, Germany, they're not. The ball's on the ground. So there's a byproduct to us as soccer players, parents, and coaches. Keep the ball on the ground at a young age. I wanted to do something for me when you guys go home and you guys have young kids. Throw a ball as hard as you can at them. What's their natural reaction? Duck or get the hell out of the way. Until us say, put your elbows up in here. You can teach the technique like Doc said, but it's properly. It's 5 yards apart, underhand. But I can promise you this, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds do not really want to head the ball 50, 60 times. They're playing FIFA on PlayStation, and they're not scoring goals on the heading. They're doing step overs and scoring goals that way. Teach the game the proper way. That's part of education. When I still say, and with all due respect to Virginia Youth Soccer, this is a concussion education symposium, and there's 7 sessions going on at the same time. I will tell you right now, this is the number one thing every single parent should be doing in this country. Lacrosse, cheerleading, horseback riding, and girls soccer, those are top 4. Every parent needs to be educated on concussions. This will change. We now are getting laws. We are now getting doctors that are educated on the thing. I already used my saying. I use it all the time. If you got a broken foot, you don't see an eye doctor. When I was starting the foundation, I went to an ER. I described 5 of the symptoms. I said I got hit in the head. I made up names, all that stuff. I wanted to do a trial. All 4 emergency rooms in 4 different states cleared me to play sports in 24 hours.
Can I actually comment on that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I need the mic. I'm not that loud. This is an important point, and I actually wish I would have brought it up, so thank you for doing so. If your child is having some signs and symptoms and you take them to the emergency department, under no circumstance should they be cleared by that emergency department for anything related to sports, because not every sign and symptom has unfolded yet, and we don't know what that child's going to look like. Initial guidance about school and activities is fine, but if you receive clearance from an emergency department physician, you need a second opinion.
And I know I feel like I'm sitting on here and I'm just writing random notes. It's how I do things now with a concussion. I know I've stressed it a little bit with the app, but anxiety is the number one thing you have to control as a coach or a parent. And what I mean by anxiety is right now, if I bring up concussions to you guys, I know exactly what 90% of you are going to say to me. Well, look at the NFL. They say you're going to die or have Alzheimer's. Junior Seau was my best friend for 2 years. Next door neighbors, we drove every single day to Patriots practice. Just because you had a concussion doesn't mean you're going to end up like Junior. But on the other hand, if you don't answer the right questions, ask the right questions, you don't find the right answers, then Junior's a phenomenal example of what this can turn out to be. But anxiety has to be controlled. And what I mean by that is I know you guys are in tough situations as parents and coaches. You're living through your kids, and I'm not telling you how to be a parent or a coach. But what I am telling you is that athlete on the other side sometimes needs someone to say, get the hell off the field. So when you ask the questions, hey, buddy, you all right? Hey, sweetheart, what's your head like? Are you dizzy? It's okay, it's all right. And this is why our education part is 30% you guys, 70% of what I do is talk to young kids. It has to be cool to have a concussion. Alex Smith stepped out of a San Francisco 49ers game. He lost his job. Kaepernick took it over. They went to the Super Bowl. The next year, Alex Smith signed a $42 million deal. I use that not for the monetary the money and all that is one thing. But it was the first time that we had an example of an athlete putting his body ahead of his life. And it paid off for him. Now, kids hear $42 million, that's a bad example. But you follow where I'm going. That's the first time we had Alex Smith. Now, Peyton Manning's saying he's failing baseline testing. It's just an example. I'm rambling. 2 things to remember. And then I'll take any questions, and as will Doc, anything you guys have. Education. This is why Nationwide Insurance is here today, providing you guys with supposedly education from me and Doc, but we're giving our best shot. Education's key. It's no different than car insurance. It's no different than anything you guys do. You guys do that without a blink of an eye. But for some reason, when it comes to education on concussions, we pass the buck. It's time to stop passing the buck. It's on you. Know the right questions to ask. And if you don't know, it's okay. Know the right people to ask those. And 2, when in doubt, sit them out. You never want to go to bed at night. And great example, you're worried about a kid that's on your team. Don't have that on you. Just when in doubt, sit them out. Under any circumstance, if you think there's any suspected concussion, and if you're wrong, the athlete like myself will hate you. We'll get over it because we're going to feel okay. But if you're really wrong, wow, and you leave them in, then you're talking about a kid, your son, your daughter, having struggles the rest of their life because they didn't make that right decision in the right moment. This is so hard for all of you to remember those signs and symptoms, which is why I say it's real simple, guys. When in doubt, pull them off the field because you guys have substitution patterns that work in your favor in the game of soccer. And if it's anything else, if it's horseback riding, if it's cheerleading, if it's ice skating, skateboarding, you can get a concussion any which way. One of you can fall out of your chair. Just be educated on the subject. Yeah.
Okay, say that you don't see the hit, but
Yeah.
you see symptoms.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you know that it's getting better or it's not? We're not always at practice to see our kids, or my daughter's a cheerleader, she'll be out at this time, but she doesn't remember taking a hit. How do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. Cheerleading's an interesting one, which is why I said blow to the head. I don't know how many cheerleaders get blows to the head, but they get the whiplash effect. I think it's key to know what kind of questions to ask. I will tell you this. Every single, including the NFL guys, even though it's not all public, and I'll leave you with that, they'll tell you if something's off.
Yeah.
If something's off, they will tell you.
I have kids who come in the clinic and they're getting to me a little later because the parent didn't see the hit, or it was just a rough practice overall, so there's not one single particular hit that stands out, but when they came off, they had the headache, they're dizzy, they're the symptoms. Look for the pattern. So first of all, talk to your child. Talk to your child. Did you take a hit in practice? Because usually when they're sitting in my office, the kid was like, well, yeah, I took that hit in practice. So you may not have been there, but your kid may know. So that's number one. Number 2 is watch for patterns. If the symptoms aren't getting better and you've checked in with your pediatrician, come to a clinic, get screened. It's not uncommon for parents to be like, we're not sure, but we want to double check. That's making sure there's no concerns before putting them in a harmful situation. But the pattern of symptoms is different. Concussion symptoms aren't going to go away in an hour or 2 with a glass of water when they eat breakfast, right? Like not like that.
And kids compare. Kids will talk to each other. So your daughter will say, well, I feel dizzy, or I have these symptoms, and another girl will say, well, mine only lasted 2 days and gone. They're not all the same. Every single concussion's different, and it manifests itself in a different way. So that's why I put the onus on all of us in the room, including the kids. If you're educated, then you can start asking the right questions.
How do you get this kid started? You get this kid that doesn't want to be pulled off the field for anything. How do you get them to tell him?
Well, the education
Taylor's
part
the
of the
expert.
athlete is part of that. I mean, you guys saw the video. I said to a teammate I had a concussion. I went through the protocol, passed the protocol, was told I'm okay. Well, of course, that's what you're going to hear. I played through sports hernias, broken feet, all that stuff. So that's at the highest level. At the youngest level, they never want to say they want to come out. But that's where the education part comes to me, because if you're educated, that kid, he or she is concussed, then you can take that he or she out of it. When you are concussed, cognitively, you can't make the right decision. From experience, every single one of concussions, I specifically remember that loopiness that you can't cognitively think, well, this is right or this wrong, because you're in the moment. Adrenaline's part of that equation. That's why I say if you're educated, you can tell if a kid's different, because you know your kids fairly well, then you just take them out.
And Taylor's right. It's about getting in front of the injury. So the opportunity to help youth understand the issue is now and not when they've had the injury. So there are lots of materials available to you in the CDC. Mike Evans is a YouTube video. It's Dr. Mike Evans. Make your kid watch it. Make your athletes watch it. He's got two. It's Concussion 101. And he's got one's Concussion, I think, Return to Learn. They're quick, they're funny, they're cute, and they are efficient. And there's other resources out there. But find something that's engaging to your youth. Help them understand the issues. They're not only responsible for themselves. We argue they're responsible for their teammates too. They can be responsible for helping identify, just like Taylor was showing, So let's get in front of it and help athletes understand the injury, what it is, and how we can help them get better. Because if the athlete feels and understands, gee, if I do the right thing now, I'll probably get to play more. I'll probably get to come back sooner versus if I take a chance and do the wrong thing and stay in and get more hits, I'm going to miss more games. Most of the athletes in my office wish they had gotten off the field sooner because they knew they'd be back sooner to play than they are now. So, educate. Yes, sir.
Our club provided a facility near us that
It's part of the baseline assessment system, sure.
baseline and provided for all the players to be able to go in and do it free of charge. But reading your stuff, is that not enough to do a full good baseline?
No, it is not. I'm going to answer your question. No, it's not. And I speak as someone who actually oversees the baseline testing component for our hospital. So by all means, baseline testing, when done properly, can be one useful tool. But I'd rather see the parents and athletes educated because they're not going to use that baseline if they don't know they had a concussion.
Education, but I just saw something up there. The baseline should also be a balance.
It can be. It can be. The best baselines really are not just one computer test, but what I would be more concerned about is that baseline test being done correctly? Are they throwing 20 kids in a room by themselves and saying, go for it? If that were the SATs, how many of you would feel comfortable with your child talking to their friend with their cell phone in their pocket taking their SATs? No. Okay. So this is an important test, right? So we want to make sure it's done in a standardized, quiet manner. The child's not distracted. I've heard stories where the athletic trainer or somebody at the school gives the kid their password, they go home, they take it, they pay their brother $5. Well, guess who actually took the baseline? Their brother. Or they're texting while they're doing it. So is it done correctly? Is education in place? Do we have a policy? These are things that have to go hand in hand. It cannot just be throw kids in a room and have them do a computer game, a boring computer game.
Obviously, money's a resource, and it's difficult to pull off everything, which is why you can never fault on education. It's free. Because that's the most difficult thing right now is we could say do this, this, or this. It costs a club money. It costs parents' money and what that is. If baselines are provided by school, that thing, there's a lot of schools going that route. It's fine. I remind everyone you can pass the test and still have a concussion. And once people hear that, it kind of opens their eyes. But then there's also Mike Matheny, the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals, who's a dear friend. His career ended due to concussions as a catcher. He failed that test back to back, so that gave him an idea of where he was, and he took it honestly, so he knew something was wrong. But it doesn't mean, I pass that thing every time.
I use it, but there's a time and a reason when it's appropriate. For some kids, it's not appropriate. I will say baseline testing is most useful as a clinician for a child who has pre-injury learning concerns, ADHD, reading, math disorder, dyslexia, anything like this. So if your child is someone who has a learning disability, a baseline is very useful because guess what? Their learning profile is variable to begin with. So after concussion, if I see variability, it's a little harder for me to tease apart what's concussion versus their natural learning style. We can still do it. I can do everything about my job and get that kid better without a baseline test. But it is a useful tool when done properly.
We've got time for probably one more question, and then I think Dr. McGill is going to be right outside. I'd be happy to answer any individual questions. Taylor's going to be out there as well, sign autographs, answer any individual questions.
They don't want my autograph.
Take a picture of it. You can get autographs from Dr.
Yeah, they
McGill
do.
as well. So, yes, last question.
Doctor, you mentioned as far as other clinicians in the area who are more suited to do these types of evaluations. Do you have a list of those? Because we're here in Northern Virginia,
Sure.
but Fairfax is a little bit far from a lot of the families.
Sure. So we do have a list. Actually, here, I'm going to give you one website that's going to help you identify all of them.
Go ahead.
There's a couple, actually, so Taylor, you might want to add to this. But if you go to the website, that's sports neuropsychology, is it .org or .com or .org?
I think it's .org.
.org. Basically, Sports Neuropsychology Society is the group I'm getting, so Google it if I'm giving you the wrong, but it's sportsneuropsych, either .com, .org. And they actually, on that website, have a list of trained concussion providers, several in this area. I am part of the Sport Clinic, which is Children's National. I'm in Fairfax. It's the only Virginia office. Innova Clinic also has a head-to-head clinic. There are some other There's some other great providers in this area. There are. That website is one you can go to. I also would encourage you, you check with your pediatrician and have your pediatrician give our clinic a call. Call Children's. I consult with doctors in the community. I help train doctors in the community all the time. Your pediatrician should also be able to give you some resources. If not, call our clinic and ask. We'll find somebody.
Dr. McGill, Taylor, thank you guys very much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.